Hello, hello. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all doing well. Just a moment. Make sure that we are all good to go. All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all ready. We are back once again to another reading stream. This is a Raven Reads episode. Welcome to the Raven's Roost. I am, of course, Raven Knight, and we are reading and probably going to wrap up my work on everyday life with raptors. For those who have not been here for the last reading we did, I encourage you to go check that out. But for a brief background, Everyday Life with Raptors was a story that me and Hannah came up with. It is a sort of combination of Jurassic World and Monster Musume, or Everyday Life with Monster Girls. The setup is pretty simple. Owen Grady is a naval lieutenant who has adopted the 4 raptor girls of the Raptor Squad, who are being trained to be the next elite fighting force of the U.S. military to deal with extra-species situations. And there has just been an incident where they were led to an island under false information, and they were forced to fight and kill human targets, which is a big no-no, and now Owen is in trouble because he might lose the girls. We're going to see how he deals with that. All right. I hope you guys are excited. I'm very excited to continue this series. And I will go ahead and warn you now, we will probably wrap up on Chapter 13 because there is not a Chapter 14 yet. The story is still in progress. I am waiting on something to give me the inspiration back. Hannah and I are working on that, and then I will continue the story. I will not be reading the extra bonus chapter to you guys just because the last time I tried reading that, it did not go over very well. A lot of people did not take it well. So we are not going to read that bonus chapter. We will just end on 13. So that is what we're going to do. Now, I will go ahead and remind you guys of the rules very briefly for the reading stream. The rules are simple. You are free to chat. I don't mind you being in chat and asking me questions or talking, but we are not talking games tonight. We will not talk games or For Honor or Dead by Daylight or politics or movies or anything of that nature. If you ask a question about such things, I will ignore it. And if it gets persistent, I will block you. It's not because I don't like you or don't want to hear from you. It's because I don't want to get distracted. Also, be respectful. I cannot do lady voices very well. My voice is too deep for that. So please no mockery of my voices when I try to do a lady's voice. So there is that. And finally, please be respectful to each other and to me in chat. Do not start getting inappropriate or difficult. It will not be cool. So yeah. All right. Why would we talk about politics? Ian, it happens all the time. I get people asking me that kind of stuff all the time. Anyway, let's get started. I am very excited. We are picking up on Chapter 8, published April 23rd, 2019. Oh, hold on. Just got a message. Sorry about that. Had an important message I had to send. All right. Where were we? Ah, yes. Everyday Life with Raptors, Part 8. All right. Owen hadn't worn his dress blues in a long time. He'd been wearing casual clothes for so long, he'd forgotten how they automatically made him feel stronger and more powerful and masculine. In all honesty, he needed that right now. The courthouse was the last place he wanted to be. He'd been called in to talk with his JAG attorney for the next steps. The attorney's name was John Hammond. He was an older fellow, but a very cheerful man, short, pudgy, and with a white beard on his face. He walked with a cane due to a limp in his left leg. In many people's opinions, he should have retired long ago, but he loved his work too much for that. Owen had known him for a few years, and seeing him often brought a smile to his face. As he walked towards him, Hammond held out a hand with a big smile on his old face. "Good to see you, Mr. Grady. Always a pleasure," he said with a thick Scottish accent. Hey, Mr. Hammond, sorry we're seeing each other again under such circumstances, but I'm sure you've heard what happened. Yes, quite the pickle we're in, I'd say," Hammond nodded. Let's go to my office and talk. I think we have a chance to get through this, though. Really. It'll require some doing, I won't lie to you about that. But I do believe it will be possible, he answered, hobbling off to his office not far away. How's your leg doing? Owen asked, noticing the limp. Hip replacement. Don't worry. Hardly a concern, Hammond chuckled. We've got bigger problems to contend with, I'm afraid. They made it to a large mahogany door, and Hammond shoved it open. Owen followed close behind and closed the door to the office behind him. The inside had a library of books to the right and left, a few knickknacks to the side, a miniature dinosaur sculpture, including a T-Rex. Hammond took a seat behind his desk and sighed, satisfied to be off his legs. Do you like dinosaurs, Mr. Hammond? I'm a lover of the human imagination, he smiled. And dinosaurs have always aroused and challenged the imagination, don't you think? What a treat it would be to actually see them today, wouldn't it? To touch one. See them in real life instead of as dead fossils in a museum. But I suppose the closest we'll get, though, are those girls of yours, yes? All the more reason to protect them, Owen answered. Absolutely. So first of all, let's go over the incident in question. Walk me through everything, from the very beginning. I wasn't there for when the girls were actually attacked, but I got a call from Hoskins saying that we had a job. He indicated extra species smuggling on the island, and my girls would take care of it. When we arrived, the girls were briefed, armed, and sent on mission. Our comms were jammed, and the girls were fired on by the gun smugglers. With one wounded and having no way out, they fought to defend themselves and fell back on predatory instinct. They stood down as I arrived on the scene, though. Hammond was taking down notes as he spoke. The girls all assumed it was just an extra species situation. Yes, we had no reason to think otherwise. Not we, Hammond corrected. Did the girls all assume? I mean, yes, they did. And did the girls make the decision for themselves? You had no say in the matter. Yes, they acted without my permission, Owen retorted. So who made the decision? Blue. As Beta, she's in second in command, and she's required to make tactical decisions in the field. But you're the Alpha, Hammond asked. Correct, Owen answered. Hammond nodded. So, do the girls always do what you two say? Or do they make decisions of their own? Are they ever defiant? Well, Delta can be defiant, but she always obeys orders in the field, Owen explained. And Charlie's a little immature and doesn't always listen, but she knows better than to talk back or resist orders. Hammond frowned and leaned over his notes. I should tell you now, Mr. Grady, this isn't going to be easy to do with what we have, he explained. They acted in self-defense. They were protecting themselves, Owen argued, and I agree with you. But we also have to keep in mind these girls aren't human and are hardly recognized as United States citizens. They are assets to the Navy, not soldiers, Hammond explained. If the court views the girls are property of the Navy, then you'll be held liable for gross negligence. As the girls were under your care and control, they are your property, and you could lose your commission on the girls, and they will be returned to Hoskins. Are you serious? They aren't just assets. They aren't weapons. They're thinking and feeling creatures. By your own admission, Mr. Grady, they never defy an order and will always obey, regardless of what you say. Well, just like any soldier would. Not just like any soldier, Hammond corrected. They're not soldiers. They are dinosaurs. Extra species girls, to be specific. The Navy does not readily recognize them as humans or soldiers. Thus, their cognizance is in question. You've got to be kidding me, Mr. Hammond. They're just guns to these people. The Navy sees them as tools. And I agree it's not fair, Hammond smiled apologetically. I'm simply explaining how the court will come at you. I think we can combat it, but to do it, we need to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that these girls are cognizant and sentient beings. All right, sure. What do we do? How do I prove it? Owen asked. Well, you can't prove anything with all due respect. They do. The girls have to prove it. Owen paused a moment as this sank in, and he leaned forward, placing a hand on the desk so we could get closer. Wait a minute. Hold on, Mr. Hammond. You're saying that we need to bring the Raptor girls to court? I asked. I think we'll only need to see two of them. Blue should be one of them. Obviously, as Beta, she answers directly to you, so we need to ensure that she's capable of her own autonomy. And then any one of the others would be fine. Anything to prove that they too are thinking and feeling for themselves, Hammond explained. Where are they right now? I left them in a safe location for the time being. I'll head over there after our meeting and bring Blue and another with me. They'll prove everything. But God, other than Blue, who the hell do I choose? 2 more laps, girls. Almost done, Blue called. Ma'am! Echo, Delta, and Charlie all sounded off as they ran yet another lap around the large lake. Owen had dropped them off at the camp they'd accidentally barged into only a few days ago. The counselors had agreed to let them stay in one of the cabins while Owen tried to work things out legally. Blue had laid out for them the severity of their situation. The very knowledge that they could go back to the facility scared even Delta into silence. She too prayed that Owen would work all this out. After they rounded the lake again, Delta pulled up along Blue and smirked. Better not fall behind me, Blue. Better not step on my feet. You're getting cocky, Blue smirked back, picking up the pace. Delta laughed and pulled ahead, only for Blue to move much faster to catch up. Blue blinked in shock as Delta got even quicker in her sprint. When had Delta gotten so much faster? It alarmed her how much her sisters were growing up without her even realizing it. Blue pushed herself harder to catch up, lapping the lake again incredibly fast. Echo and Charlie struggled to surge after the two competitors. Hey guys, slow down, Charlie cried. I can't keep up. She screamed suddenly as the grass under her caved away to the mud and she slipped, falling into the lake with a loud splash. Blue and Echo both stopped and ran back to her. Charlie, Echo cried, are you okay? Echo held out her hand as Charlie shook her head hard, her pig twin tail swinging in all directions and throwing dirty water. I'm filthy now. Ugh, I hate it. You were already filthy, Delta pointed out. We're sweating up a storm doing this. Yeah, but now I'm muddy too, and mud's worse. Echo grabbed her hand and yanked her out of the water to help clean off her pants and legs. Oh, well, we'll get a shower and you'll be good as new, Blue sighed. Come on, girls. Might as well call it there for now. Hey, Blue, why not finish our race first? I was just about to win, Delta called back. Later, Delta. Right now I think we need some rest, Blue answered, sighing. Delta snorted in response, but followed after her all the same. Think the mess hall has anything good to eat? Echo asked, trying to change the subject. They always do, Charlie giggled. They have really tasty food at this camp. Yeah, but you eat too much, Charlie, Blue noted. We're guests here. We shouldn't be mooching off the camp staff like this. Ha! Are you kidding? Delta laughed. They seem happy to have us. Either way, it's what would be polite, Blue argued. Blue, Echo spoke up, when did Alpha say he would return? Tomorrow, hopefully. He'll call the camp director if anything changes, Blue answered. I still don't really get it, Charlie muttered as they walked to the shower hut. The far hut in the middle of the camp area was where the campers would take showers. Since this week there were no campers and only counselors, they had the showers to themselves. What don't you get? Echo asked. Well, I mean, we didn't do anything wrong. Alpha himself said so. We were defending ourselves, Charlie argued. Why should we get in trouble for that? Well, it's not just us who would get in trouble, Blue explained. Since Alpha's our handler, he'll be held responsible. The human court needs to decide if what we did was wrong or not. I think there's more to it than that, Echo answered. I'm not sure, but I think if it were a group of humans who would kill those men, it would be a different story. I think part of this has to do with the fact that we're raptors. So now we're being persecuted just for being raptors, Delta growled. Just great. Calm down, all of you, Blue snapped. Alpha won't let anything happen to us. Now to the showers, then we go for some lunch. The girls quickly stripped down and ran to the showers with Blue right behind them. Though her words of encouragement seemed to relax Charlie a little, they did little to ease her own mind. As she stood under the pouring water, her heart felt heavy. What on earth would happen to them if Alpha couldn't succeed in court? Would they really have to go back there? No. No, it won't happen. I won't let it happen. Blue suddenly heard her cell phone ringing in her bag just outside the shower room. Running out of the shower, she threw a towel around herself and dug into the bag with her soaking hand until she found her phone. Lifting it to her ear, she smiled, realizing it was Alpha. Alpha! Are you okay? I'm fine, Blue. How are the others? They're fine, too. We're staying active and trying to be productive while we're here. I'm glad to hear it. Listen, in order to win this thing, I'm going to need your help, Owen muttered. Whatever you need, we'll do it, Blue answered. It won't be easy, Blue. I need 2 of you girls to show up in court and testify. Blue paused a moment, blinking. Testify? We have to appear as witnesses? It's complicated to explain, but the Navy needs proof that you and the girls are sentient and more than just animals. The only way to prove it is for you to show them. I'm going to need to borrow you and one of the other girls to do this. Well, that's strange, but I'll do it. I know you will, Blue. But here's the hard part. Which of the other girls should testify? Because each one spells trouble, Owen growled. Blue blinked, thinking it over in her mind, and then she began to bite her lip. Who should come with us? Whoever we pick is going to be asked to take the stand and maybe asked some very difficult questions. I'm leaving it up to you, Blue. You need to decide which of your sisters we bring to court. Everyday Life with Raptors, Part 9. I don't like this, Alpha, Charlie muttered, squirming in her suit. It had been a chore just to convince her to put on her dress blues for court. It wasn't an easy decision to determine which Raptor to bring in besides Blue. But Blue had actually recommended Charlie. Delta was a definite bad idea. She wasn't good with authority on the best of days, so being in a courtroom would likely cause more problems. Echo was more mature and level-headed, but had an intense fear of crowds and being judged. She likely would have a panic attack on the stand. Charlie was immature and wild, but was able to handle scrutiny better than the other two. She was the only one who might be able to handle the stand. So, while Charlie was brought to the city for court, Delta and Echo had remained at the camp until further notice. However, looking professional was not easy for her, considering Owen knew there was nothing at all professional about Charlie. Just deal with it a little longer, Charlie, please, Blue explained. She was already in her attire and wearing it very well. She had buttoned on her coat and had on the skirt that fell down to her reptilian knees. She didn't bother with shoes. In fact, the girls never wore shoes. There was no point. Their raptor claws were too large and sharp to handle any form of footwear. Their tails were allowed to slide out of their skirts. The rear of their skirts was cut up in the middle to allow for their tails to slide out neatly. Owen hadn't even talked Blue into wearing basic makeup, though Charlie was still adamantly against the notion. You both look good, Owen assured them. From behind, hobbling on his cane, was Mr. Hammond, smiling broadly. This is Mr. John Hammond. He's representing you today. Attention! Blue shouted, causing both her and Charlie to jump to attention and salute Mr. Hammond, who just chuckled. My, what good reflexes. I'm afraid there's no need for such formalities with me. Please, relax, girls. It will look a lot better for you in the courtroom if you just relax. Both Charlie and Blue relaxed some, and Hammond indicated a few chairs around the room for them they could sit. Charlie and Blue hurried to their own chairs and sat down, careful not to sit on their tails. Hammond sat across from them while Owen stood by the door. Good. Now, I'm going to level with you both, Hammond explained. But the fate of this trial hinges heavily on the two of you. What do you need from us? Blue asked. I need you both to relax and be yourselves, he answered warmly. There was a childish cheerfulness that seemed to radiate from Hammond that made both Owen and Blue seem to relax, and made Charlie seem even more invested in him. The court is going to try to determine your competency. To the eyes of the Navy, you and your sisters are just weapons, tools to be used. If the Navy feels this way, then the one responsible for the events last week will fall under Officer Grady, or Alpha, as you know him. It wasn't his fault, Charlie cried, losing her disposition. He wasn't even there. I know that, my dear. But if the Navy sees you as his weapons, then he's responsible for the lives you took. The Navy needs to recognize that you are thinking and feeling creatures, that you are sentient. If they see you as soldiers and not as weapons, then your actions were your own responsibility, and thus it can be seen as self-defense. If our actions are seen as self-defense, will Alpha be okay? Yes. You and Owen will both be free to go about your usual business, Hammond laughed. But I'm afraid that depends entirely on the both of you. What happens if we can't? Charlie asked. Hammond didn't answer, but just coughed uncomfortably. Charlie's eyes flew to Owen. What would happen, Alpha? Well, you'd have to... It doesn't matter what would happen, Hammond answered, reaching out and placing a hand on Charlie's clawed fingers, because you both will do just fine. Charlie beamed happily and looked at Owen and Hammond excitedly. Blue, though smiling, looked much more concerned. What do we have to do to prove our sentience? Blue asked. You'll be required to answer a few questions from myself and the prosecution, Hammond answered. That's why we're going to talk about here before we go in. I'm going to brief you. So let me go through what kind of things you're going to talk about in the trial. We're ready for anything, Blue assured him. I'm sure you are. I promise that nothing I ask you will be difficult or hard, he smiled. I'll simply ask you questions about your daily routine and how much of it is controlled by Mr. Grady, he pointed towards Owen. However, what the prosecution will say will be much more hurtful, I fear. How so? Charlie asked. For starters, they won't be polite. They'll likely make inferences and suggestions about your relationship with Owen that are simply not true. They will be trying to tempt a reaction out of you to defend him, or to make yourselves look prone to violence. We're not scared of questions, Blue assured him. Maybe you should be, Owen grumbled. Why don't we practice a little? I'm going to pretend to be the prosecution, and you pretend you're on the stand, okay? It will help you understand what you're confronting, Hammond offered. Blue and Charlie nodded, and thus a long and difficult afternoon of trial prep began. But nothing could have prepared them for what came in only a few days when the trial began. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial. There were dozens of people there, many not even military, who were only there to get a look at the Raptor girls that were sitting in behind the defendant's table. The prosecutor was a short man with a fine trimmed beard and cold eyes that made Charlie and Blue uncomfortable, so they felt it best not to look at him. Owen sat next to them, smiling encouragingly. When the judge walked in, he too let his eyes rest on the Raptors, taking them in a moment in awe before sitting down himself. The trial moved slowly, and it was hard to follow everything at first. Owen didn't fully follow all that was said, as he was busy trying to keep Charlie from squirming or moving around in her chair. She was ADHD and a meth pipe. There was no convincing her of keeping still or steady. Finally, the fateful words were said that Owen didn't want to hear. "Would the Raptor designated Blue please take the stand?" Blue stood up quickly and marched towards the table, causing a bunch of oohs and ahs from the crowd. She climbed onto the stage and sat down, her feral eyes darting around to take in the settings around her. Hammond walked towards her first and gave a polite grin. "Hello, Blue. How are you today?" he asked. "I'm fine, thank you," she answered. Owen beamed. She was being professional and polite, everything she was supposed to be. "How would you say you feel being here today?" Hammond asked. "I feel a bit uncomfortable," she answered. "I don't like being out on the spot like this." "So would you say you feel conscious of all of us here?" "Of course I am," she growled in frustration. "Blue, do you understand why you were on the stand today?" Hammond asked. "Do you want to know if I'm a sentient creature? If I'm capable of thinking for myself?" she replied. "How does that make you feel?" Hammond asked. "With all due respect, pissed off," Blue snapped. "From the moment I was hatched, my sisters and I have made our own choices, forcing ourselves to make difficult and harsh decisions just to stay alive. Do you even know what we went through?" Owen shot her a dangerous look. Blue was losing her cool. But with a single sigh, Blue began to breathe again and calm herself. This was good, and what Hammond had taught her to do. Getting upset would only hurt their case by making Blue and the Raptors look highly strung and emotional, showing they were prone to violence. It was vital that they maintain calm. "So, do you make difficult choices regularly?" "That's what it means to be a leader," Blue answered. "My sisters need me." "Because they can't make decisions themselves?" Hammond asked, curious. "No, because I'm the older sibling, and because it's an older sibling's job to take care of their younger." This got a soft hum from the crowd. A good sign. Hammond smiled and walked away. "No more questions?" The prosecutor stood up after him and adjusted his tie, smiling at Blue, though his grin had no warmth or friendliness. More of a smoldering arrogance. "So, you make the big decisions for your sisters?" he asked. "Yes," Blue answered. "Was that always the case?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "Who made the decisions before you were their leader?" "No one. We chose the leader out of the four of us." The prosecutor reached for a notebook on his table and looked over it a moment and then smiled again. And the smile was starting to piss off Owen. "The second oldest of your sisters, Echo, right?" he asked. "What about her?" "She has a long scar on her face, doesn't she?" Blue stiffened, and even Charlie trembled and lowered her head. "How'd she get that scar?" "Objection!" Hammond called. "This question isn't relevant." "If you give me a moment, Your Honor, I will reveal the relevance," the prosecutor assured the judge. The judge looked him over a moment and then sighed. "I'll allow it," he cautioned. The prosecutor turned back to Blue. "Well, how did Echo get her scar?" Blue sneered and looked towards her feet. "We got into a fight when we were younger. This was before we met Owen," she grumbled. "Well, what was the fight about?" he asked. "To determine who would be the alpha of our pack," Blue answered. "So you fight to decide leadership. That seems a bit excessive." "Objection!" Hammond shouted. "Sustained," the judge replied. The prosecutor nodded and returned to his questions. "So, what made Echo unfit to be the leader?" "That's not important," Blue answered. "It is to this court," was the fierce reply. Blue tensed up and the judge looked at her curiously. Do you need a moment, Miss Blue?" he asked. "No. Echo is my sister. I love her, but she was arrogant and hot-headed. She was more in love with personal strength and glory than she was leading our pack. I told her not to challenge me for leadership, and she didn't listen, so we fought." "And you won?" "Obviously." "So you put her back in her place?" "No, that's not it at all." "It isn't? Your subordinate was out of line. You put her back into it, didn't you?" That's not true." "I think her scar might say otherwise." "Objection!" Hammond roared. "Withdrawn." The prosecutor sighed, turning away. "I have no more questions." The room was deathly quiet, and Blue only sat in defeat, looking like she just lost at a battle or a game of some sort. Owen tried to show encouragement towards her, but she wouldn't even meet his gaze. The knowledge of how she and Echo had been rivals in the past and how she'd hurt her the way she had, it was still a point of contention for her. How could the prosecutor have known this, though? Owen himself hadn't known about that scar and the reason for it until Echo and Blue had told him about it. Who told the prosecution? How did he know about that scar? Hammond smiled and pat Blue on the back as she came back to sit down, but he too looked a bit nervous. Your Honor, may I request a 10-minute recess? Granted, the judge answered as everyone began to rise. Hammond leaned over to Owen, a look of anger and frustration on his face. How does the prosecution know this information? I don't know, Owen grumbled, but I am going to find out. Chapter 10. We'd like to call Charlie to the stand, called Mr. Hammond. Blue glanced at Owen with enough fear to show that she wanted to run out of the room and fast. Charlie rose up and made her way to the stand, smiling her usual excited grin. Owen and Mr. Hammond had tried to brief her on what would be asked and how she should answer, but whether or not she'd retain it was for the real question. Charlie took the same oath as Blue had, and then Dr. Hammond stood up and approached her, beaming broadly. Good afternoon, Charlie. How are you feeling today? He asked. I'm okay. I don't really like wearing my uniform, though, she answered. Charlie, do you know why you're here? What this trial is even about? Yes, sir, Charlie answered. You're trying to prove that me and my sisters are sentient, that we're not weapons. Do you think you're sentient? Hammond asked. I don't really know what it means, but I know that we're not weapons. And how do you know that? Hammond asked. Do I look like a gun to you? Charlie snapped. The courtroom hummed with a ripple of laughter. The judge banged his gavel once to return silence to the room, but Charlie had already accomplished what Owen and Hammond had hoped for. Though immature and childish in every situation, this would help prove a case for sentience and cognizance. They weren't blind and unthinking animals. Hammond smiled at Charlie and nodded. You certainly don't to me, he laughed. Now, Charlie, what happened on the night you and your sisters were called to duty at the smuggling compound? We got shot at. And did you get hurt? I did. She pointed towards her arm. It hurt a lot, and it was really scary. When you found out that the targets you'd been sent to deal with were humans and not extra-species individuals, what does protocol say to do in that circumstance? Charlie's brow furrowed a moment as she thought about it. I'm not as good at understanding the protocol stuff. Objection! The prosecution stood up in frustration. This witness is bordering on incompetent. If she can't even explain the fundamental protocol she's supposed to follow, then how can we trust her testimony on it? The judge glanced at him and then at Hammond. Sustained. Change the question or move on, counselor. Allow me to rephrase the question, Hammond sighed. What do you know you were supposed to do in that situation? Well, we were supposed to pull back and regroup with Officer Grady, Charlie answered. Hammond turned to the jury and smiled. The protocol clearly states, doesn't it, that in the event of confronting human hostiles, your team is not to engage and instead to report to their objection, asked and answered, the prosecutor shouted. Charlie knew what the protocol was, but didn't realize she did. I'm simply restating what she said so the jury can recognize this is a case of misunderstanding. Please, move on, counselor, the judge groaned. I'm not sure I like the prosecutor much, Blue whispered to Owen. You're not supposed to. Just bear with it a little longer, Owen answered. They both looked back to Hammond as he approached Charlie. Charlie, were you afraid for your life? I was. When Blue gave the order to engage the targets, did you agree with the decision? I wasn't sure, Charlie answered honestly. I knew that we weren't supposed to, but it was a desperate situation, right? We had the right to protect ourselves. You had the right to, Hammond asked. So you believe yourself independent and capable of thinking and acting for yourself with your own inalienable rights? Well, I don't know what inalienable means, but yeah, we're soldiers, aren't we? We should be treated like it. I couldn't agree more, Hammond beamed. And just one more question, Charlie. If you were given a second chance, would you still follow Blue's orders to engage those men and kill them? Objection! The prosecutor scoffed, standing up. Not only is this hardly relevant, but we're not here to debate what could have been done in the event in question. If you'll permit me, Your Honor, Hammond asked reasonably. The judge rubbed his forehead in frustration, but nodded. Last chance, counselor. Make it good. He raised a finger to symbolize it was his last chance, and Hammond turned back to Charlie. Well, Charlie shrugged. I don't think I would have. I mean, look at all the trouble it's caused my family. I don't want to put us through this ever again. Full awareness of your actions and the consequences of them. I've never known a gun that could do that. Object withdrawn, Hammond smirked, turning and walking back to the table. That's all for this witness. Charlie smiled as Owen gave her the thumbs up. The prosecution stood, adjusted his tie, and then looked at Charlie with a smile that held anything but encouragement. On the night in question, Charlie, you said you were injured. Did that impact your decision-making? He asked.
Not really. I was scared, but I wasn't worried about making bad decisions.
Why not?
Well, Blue makes the decisions, Charlie answered. She's the beta, so she's second in command. If Alpha's not around, then... Officer Grady isn't around. She makes the decisions.
Is that always the case?
He asked. Yeah, always, Charlie answered.
Have you ever questioned Blue's decisions? Or even Alpha's, for that matter?
He asked. Charlie shrugged. Sometimes, but they know what's best. It's easier to just trust their decisions.
So it could be said that you don't think for yourself. Objection! Hammond snapped.
I do think for myself, Charlie snarled.
The judge banged his gavel again to silence the room. The objection is sustained, the judge growled. I'm sorry, Your Honor, the prosecutor replied. He turned back to Charlie. Charlie, do all of your sisters follow Blue's leadership?
Of course.
Always?
Always.
No matter what? Objection! Hammond shouted. Asked and answered. Sustained. What happens when you don't? He continued, without skipping a beat.
Charlie tensed up a little as the prosecutor walked back to his table and pulled out a series of laminated photographs. Each one had a different profile shot of Echo when she was a child. She had a fresh image of the scar that ran across her face. They were the medical photos from after the incident. Owen had seen them only once, but he didn't have access to them. Blue looked away in disgust and disdain, and Charlie bit her lip, holding back tears. Hammond was beside himself. Objection! I request to approach the bench, he shouted. The judge nodded and waved both of the lawyers up to speak to him privately. Blue was trembling with rage as Owen stared at the bench, trying to hear what was being said. He couldn't hear, but he could tell it was a heated discussion. How do they have those? Owen hissed. Everything that happened to you girls on the island is classified. Alpha, this is bad. I don't think I like what they'll ask Charlie. I hope Hammond can shut this down, Owen agreed. After a few more moments of discussion, the judge waved them back. The photos will be admitted into evidence. Hammond sat back down, anger etched on his face. Hammond, those are classified images. How can they admit them? It's complicated. I'll explain later, Hammond whispered. Don't worry. I'll make sure that he doesn't take things anywhere they can't go. Charlie, the prosecution proceeded, do you remember Blue giving these scars to Echo? I do.
And do you remember why?
Yes. Echo was trying to become the leader.
So Echo wanted to be leader, and when she did that, Blue put her back in her place. Objection! Sustained! Let me try a different question. Does Blue usually physically injure her subordinates when they don't do what she says?
No, Charlie cried. Blue loves us. She only did that for Echo's own good.
So that scar on your sister's face is for her own good.
It's not like that, Charlie cried.
Owen swiftly had to grab Blue's arm to stop her from leaping out of her seat in a fury. Then tell us what it's like, he nearly shouted. What good came from this? Charlie had tears building up in her eyes as she tried to think of the right words to say.
We're all smart, but we can't act alone. Since we were hatched, we don't remember our parents, so we always had to look out for one another. Blue was the smartest. She knows a lot and knows how to lead. She cared about all of us and wanted what was best for all of us. Echo just didn't. She was full of herself, and she was kind of a braggy person, if that's the word for it. So Blue knew she wouldn't make a good leader, and they fought, and Blue won.
So Blue knew what was best?
Yes.
And because she knows what's best, you do anything she tells you to do?
Yes.
And if she told you to kill Delta, Echo, or even Alpha, would you do it? Objection! Hammond roared. Blue was on her feet, and Owen had to grab her around the middle to pull her back down.
No, I'd never do that.
But you just said you'd do whatever Blue told you to do.
You're confusing me.
What's so confusing, Charlie? You're a soldier, aren't you? You just told us yourself. You do what you're told. So if Blue told you to kill your comrade for your own good, would you do it, yes or no?
Stop it!
Charlie cried, covering her ears as if she could block out the question. Objection! This is outrageous! Hammond bellowed. The judge slammed his gavel on the desk with tremendous force 3 times. That is enough, counselor! One more word and I'll hold you in contempt. Sustained on all counts! Your Honor, I'd like to redirect, Hammond pleaded. Charlie was bent over, crying into her knees as she held her hands over her ears. I don't think she's in a fit state for that, counselor. Trust me, Your Honor, please. I need to speak to her. The judge gazed down at Charlie before finally giving a brief nod for Hammond to go ahead. Hammond stood and approached Charlie slowly and calmly. Charlie, I need you to calm down. Can you hear me? She nodded.
Charlie, why did that question confuse you? Charlie didn't answer at first, simply sitting still and sobbing. I need to know, Charlie. Why couldn't you answer that question? I can't kill my family. They're all I have. Charlie whimpered through sobs, making Blue shake as she too was beginning to cry. We need each other. Blue would never tell me to do that because if I did, we'd all die. I love my sisters and Alpha. Without another word, she ran from the stand and flew into Blue's arms, who caught her and held her in an embrace, stroking her hair reassuringly. Shh, it's okay. It's okay, Blue whispered. This court is adjourned for the day, the judge sighed. I think we could all use a break. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9:30. With another bang of his gavel, the court began to disperse. Owen stood up from his seat and smiled sadly at Hammond. How bad is it, Mr. Hammond? Well, we can make this work for us. By forcing Charlie to cry on the stand, he further validated her emotional state. He won't win on that argument alone. I have to go back to my office and prepare. Be ready. Because tomorrow he's planning on calling you to the stand, Mr. Grady, Hammond said. Right. I'd like to meet with you tonight to go over what he'll ask. He turned and started to walk away, but as he passed out of view, Owen saw someone else, an overweight figure moving through the crowd. That son of a bitch, he hissed. Owen moved fast once he was outside of the courthouse and he could catch up to the much more slow and lumbering fellow in front of him. He moved swiftly and efficiently like a guided missile. Hoskins, you arrogant son of a bitch, he snapped. Hoskins spun around just in time for Owen to grab him by the collar and slam him against the wall of the courthouse. Oh, what's the matter with what the hell are you doing, you fat, ugly son of a bitch, Owen spat. You're the one with the clearance to have access to those photos of Echo. You've been feeding information to the prosecution on this case, and I want to know why. Just what kind of game do you think you're playing, Grady? Hoskins answered forcefully. The Navy didn't hand those girls over to you so you could play house. They're trained and efficient killing machines, and it's time the world realized that. They're girls, Owen bellowed. They deserve a life and a future that doesn't involve ripping out throats. And the fact you think that shows that leaving them when you're cared was a mistake, Hoskins snapped. Under your roof, you have 4 of the most efficient weapons the world has ever seen. A perfect combination of prehistoric and modern killing power. You saw it for yourself on that goddamn island. On that island, Hoskins, I saw 4 girls terrified for their lives reacting to a dangerous situation. And what I saw were the most deadly weapons in forest combat I've ever laid eyes on. Owen stopped a moment as the realization hit him. You were there. You knew what happened, Owen snapped. You set us up! Hoskins adjusted his shirt as Owen released him and coughed very professionally. It's time you woke up and realized what's going on here, Mr. Grady, he explained. This is the march of progress. Progress breeds warriors and creates success, and it always wins in the end. If this is what you call progress, taking these girls and putting them back on that island of yours, turning them into nothing more than just guns for your little experiments, I hope to God progress loses this round. You have a good date, Grady, Hoskins answered, marching off and leaving Owen fuming behind him, wondering what on earth his next move would be. Part 11. At the camp, Echo was sitting by the lake looking out over the still water. There was a mist rolling from the mountains and settling itself over everything. It was gorgeous, like something out of a dream. She swished her tail along the grass and smiled softly, imagining Blue and Charlie back here, and Delta, too. They could all sit here together and laugh while they watched the mist drift along on the sound of birds chirping. They could even go to sleep to this. Wouldn't it be nice to sleep again without worry? But could that ever happen? Echo frowned as she thought that chilling statement to herself, her mind drifting back to the island, the place they were born and where they'd lived before meeting Alpha. There was no pretty views like this on that island base. There were no birds chirping. In fact, the more she thought about it, Echo didn't remember much of what the outside of the base looked like. She remembered stuffy rooms and large running spaces which little to see or look at. She remembered observation windows on all sides where men in military uniforms and lab coats watched her and her sisters while bickering. She remembered a time she'd wanted their approval, wanted to prove something to them. She thought back to those days with no small degree of contempt as her hand gently ran along the scar on her face. Who says you get to be our Alpha? She'd mocked Blue. Just 'cause you're the oldest, you get to be in charge. I'm every bit as tough and as knowledgeable as you are. Charlie had been hiding behind Blue then. They were still so young. Charlie being the youngest. She hadn't wanted to make a scene, and she hated being watched. She had often stayed close to Blue or Delta. Delta just smirked as she observed. She knew Echo wasn't fit to be leader, but she thrived on the competition. Always one for a bit of action. Perhaps the thought of a little sibling rivalry would shake up the mundane for her. But Blue hadn't budged. If I thought those things were all it took to be leader, I wouldn't care about handing over leadership. But they aren't all that matter, Echo. What else does? Echo asked. Patience, humility, wisdom. There you go again, Echo laughed. Holding yourself over us with your self-righteous bullshit. Echo, stop it. Blue's a good leader, Charlie whimpered, not wanting to see her sisters fight. Yeah, she is. But we need a better one. Echo took a step forward, flashing her foot claw. Now Charlie was scared and quickly stumbling away. Delta backed up too, but didn't take her eyes off of them. Let's see if you can fight your way to the top, Blue. Don't do it, Echo. Don't tell me what to do. Echo remembered it all. The vicious attack she'd made. The ferocious striking at the hip, which Blue had evaded. How Blue had not thrown the first strike, but kept dodging and weaving out of her way. It made Echo furious. It was ridiculous. Fighting back Blue. She wanted her to fight back. She wanted Blue to strike her. She wanted Blue to do something. Show her that she deserved to be leader more than me. Do something with your useless hide, Blue. We all wanted off that island. So why not prove you could be the one to take us there? If you wouldn't help us off that island, she had said to herself, then I'll take the lead. I'll lead us off the island. But it was her own arrogance that did her in. The last thing she remembered about the fight was her making a flying kick at Blue. Blue pivoted to dodge and brought up her own leg in a roundhouse kick, which struck Echo across the face with the claw of her foot. Echo had met it with the full force of her momentum, and she was knocked back several feet. Her face had been practically ripped open. Charlie had screamed. Delta had gashed and run to her side, and Blue stood there stiff as a log, unable to believe what she'd just done. As for her, as for Echo, she faded out of consciousness. The stitches took weeks to finish healing, and the scar would never fully heal on her face. Every day she looked at that scar, and it broke her internally. It was a reminder that Blue had given her, even if not intentionally. The reminder that she was not fit to lead the girls. And Echo had taken that message to her heart and soul, and it broke every ounce of confidence she'd ever had. She didn't resent Blue. She loved Blue with all her heart, and she followed Blue willingly as her leader from then on. But nothing would ever bring back her old confidence. Delta had tried to spar with her and hope it would bring her out, but little worked. Charlie had tried playing with her and cuddling close at night to make Echo feel better, but it never made a difference. She was broken. The old, confident Echo was gone. Was it bad, though? Was that a bad thing? She wasn't entirely sure if she even wanted that old Echo back, that confident sister who would willingly attack her own. You okay here? Echo spun around in surprise to see a tall young man standing on the hill. He had brown hair and deep brown eyes. A full beard covered his chin and sides of his face, making him resemble something like a lion of a man, but he had a handsome smile, and he didn't look especially dangerous. He reminded her a little of Alpha. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. Name's Baloo. Baloo? Echo asked. Yeah, staffer nickname. But if you want to know my real name, it's Garth. Just don't tell the kids. Echo blinked a few times, amazed this person could be so open to talking to her. If I'm interrupting anything... No, I was just thinking. The lake's a fine place to do that, he cried. But the campers are done with lunch and the staff has plenty of leftovers. I also want to know if you and your sister would like to, have some? Echo didn't answer at first, and Garth walked closer, sitting down beside her. I guess you're not that hungry. I'd like to, but I don't want to impose, Echo replied shyly, trying to cover her face. She didn't want him seeing or staring at her scar. Garth laughed and shook his head. No imposing around here, girl. You and your sisters are guests here. When she didn't answer, he shrugged and grunted. Well, in that case, I might go for a swim. He stood up and took off his shirt, and Echo glanced up. The first thing she saw as his shirt came off made her gasp in terror. 3 long scars ran up from his hip to his left bicep. They were long, ugly, and dark red. One looked massively torn up and rigged, and she quickly looked away. Garth paused and flushed a little. Oh, right. You'd never seen this before. It's why I got my nickname. This right here I got on my first year as a staffer, he explained. What happened? Echo asked. Garth laughed and threw his shirt down, shaking his head. Everyone always asks. All right. Guess you get to hear the story, too. He stands in front of Echo and starts speaking loudly and clearly. He's obviously become used to telling this story. So, when you're a first-year staffer, like I was, you have to go on a hike for 3 days with the other first-year staff and Honcho. We hike out to the mountains and camp among the wildlife. We share stories, get our nicknames, all that fun stuff. Well, on our second night, it's raining real hard, and I see a cave up ahead, and I say we should camp in there. Why set up tents in the rain when a dry cave will do? But Honcho says we shouldn't because bears live in caves, and, well, bears are crazy. Echo giggled, and Garth continued. So I'm too full of myself to listen to him. Of course, I was full of myself. I was excited. I was arrogant, maybe even a little stubborn, and I got up to investigate the cave. Sure enough, I take 3 steps inside when a huge old black bear suddenly roars at me. I scream and start to run when that beast takes a swing at me and cuts me wide open. He pointed to his scars. Well, I fell down that hill a bloody mess. Honcho had to run over and shoot at the bear to scare it off, and as for me, it looked really bad. What did they do? Echo asked. Well, I faded in and out of consciousness a few times, but I remember they carried me as far back to the camp as they could and then called for a rescue chopper. Soon I was being hauled out of the woods by a bunch of medics and carried off to a hospital. That's horrifying, Echo cried. I don't even know what to say to that. Are you really okay now? I wasn't for the first week or two. I could barely walk or move. I was bedridden for a while, and worse was the wound got infected, so I got a bit sick for a while too. It was pretty awful. Garth sighed, and Echo sighed long and low, curling up on the grass. I got my scar fighting with my sister, she admitted. I was kind of arrogant too, I guess. Garth nodded. I kind of guessed that might be the case. How could you guess that? Echo asked. I don't know, just sort of the way you carry yourself. You look like someone who was on top of the world and got knocked off your mountain, he explained. Well, you don't, Echo growled darkly, feeling a little insulted. What's your excuse for not being timid and miserable like me? Me? Guess I didn't have time to be miserable, he laughed. These scars on my gut are just a reminder of the fact that I ate myself a slice of humble pie and lived to tell about it. And not everyone can say that. But you're mutilated. You're scarred for life, Echo said. Just a reminder not to be an arrogant moron, he laughed. You know what? I'm glad I have these. For one thing, they're a fun story to tell. And for the other, well, a lot of people are arrogant or full of themselves these days, and they have to work hard to remember to be humble. Me, I got 3 nice big reminders I can look at every day. Saves me a lot of trouble. Echo just laughed to herself and shook her head. I never thought of it like that. I always saw this as, well, a reason to be ashamed. I feel ashamed of what I did back then, but I also say I'm proud of myself for getting over it. Garth beamed proudly and then walked to the water. Anyway, I'll let you decide if you're hungry or not. Mess hall's back that way. He pointed back up the road towards the center of camp, and Echo smiled as she watched Garth dive into the freezing cold water. And then she ran a finger along her scar across her face, flushing deeply. Proud of it, huh? She whispered. Could anyone be proud of this? Would Alpha be proud of me? From the edge of the forest, Delta watched Echo get up from where she sat to walk to the mess hall. When she'd seen that counselor guy walk over to talk to her, she'd stuck around to see if anything happened. Nothing seemed to be wrong, and she hadn't heard what was said. The smile on Echo's face told her she had nothing to worry about. What was it they'd talked about, she wondered. At the courthouse, miles away, Owen Grady was finally being called to the stand. The courtroom was silent as he approached the bench and sat down. Blue and Charlie both sat stiff as they watched their alpha prepare to be interrogated. He told them not to say or do anything during this, not to move a muscle if they could help it. As Hammond had said, this testimony would be critical. The prosecutor walked up and smiled politely, but with as much civility and kindness as a pit viper. Lieutenant Grady, do you know why you're here today? To judge whether or not the Raptors should be considered sentient and responsible for their own actions. That they aren't just tools or weapons, Owen answered. Do you think they're sentient? I've lived with them and trained with them for quite some time now. I can tell you honestly, they are perfectly sentient, Owen answered. And why do you think this? Because they think for themselves. They can be stubborn and hard-headed, and there are times they won't do what I tell them to do. They have their own interests and dislikes, like any normal person would. Certainly, so they make decisions for themselves. What about you? He asked. Objection! The witness is not on trial, Hammond called. Lieutenant Grady is the Raptor's handler. He bears a degree of responsibility to these events, the prosecutor replied. Sustained, the judge replied with a nod. Fine, I'll re-ask the question. The girls can make decisions for themselves, but what about for you? I don't think I understand the question, Owen answered. What's the relationship between you and the girls? He asked. Relationship? It's like you said. I'm their handler, Owen laughed. Anything more? Owen paused a moment, taking in the question. Now he understood. Now he realized what angle this was going for. He stiffened and shot his eyes to Blue and Charlie, both now curious to what he said. He was trapped, and he knew it. His eyes spun to Hoskins in the back of the room, smirking to himself. This was his doing too, wasn't it? If he answered that they were nothing more than his squad that he handled, the girls' faith might be shaken in him, and it would ruin years of hard work he'd done with them to help them realize that they were a family. But if he said it was more complicated than that, said that they were more to him than just his agents that he worked with, then his ability to be objective and professional would be called into question publicly, and they might be removed from his care regardless of how this trial went. There was no way out of this. No way out of this trap. God damn you, Owen hissed. I'm sorry I didn't hear that. Could you speak up? The prosecutor asked. Answer the question, Lieutenant Grady, the judge urged. I'll ask you one more time, Mr. Grady. What is the relationship between you and those raptors? Do I need to repeat the question? The prosecutor asked. He didn't need to repeat it. Owen had heard it very clearly, and he wished he hadn't. The trap was far more clever than he'd anticipated, and he was struggling to find a way out of it. The room felt like it was closing in as the ghosts of both outcomes kept haunting his shoulders, daring him to choose their side, daring him to misplay his hand. There was nothing he could do. He had to answer honestly, and the truth would do anything but set him free. I am the handler of the Raptor squad, Owen answered. Are you more than that? The prosecutor added. If you mean if I'm romantically involved, then no, I'm not. That would be a breach of our professional relationship, Owen answered, his eyes darting to Blue and Charlie, who were both sitting stiff and rigid, neither moving or responding. They were just as interested in how this shaped up, and he felt a pang of anger at them for this. Could they not anticipate the horrible things he was about to say? Certainly you're not romantically involved, Mr. Grady, but after living with 4 healthy young women for as long as you have, and claiming that they are sentient, surely feelings must have come about. Anything done between myself and the squad is strictly professional, Owen answered flatly. The prosecutor smiled. Here it comes. And Owen had to brace himself. Well, if that's true, would you object to a reassignment? After all, if this case goes south, you could very easily just reassign yourself and this all goes away. It becomes the responsibility of their new handler. Why go through this whole trial and facade when your relationship to the girls is simply professional? Nothing to worry about, he asked. Owen knew there was nowhere to hide now. It was true. The trial was meant to prove the girls' sentience, but there was a deeper context to it. If the girls were found sentient, then they were simply soldiers acting in self-defense. But if they weren't sentient, then the Navy would be held responsible for not handling their weapons properly, and the girls would be taken away, and the Navy would take the fall. The easiest thing to do at that point would be to just reassign their handler. The girls weren't technically considered soldiers as of yet, and thus reassigning them wouldn't be too much of a difficult thing to do, like signing over your sidearm for a different one. Just exchange faulty tools and be done with it. But Owen couldn't do that. Such an action would ruin the relationship he had with the girls. The very thing he was trying to pretend didn't exist. Lieutenant Grady, the prosecutor pressed, if the girls are just soldiers under your command, then why are we here? Objection! Badgering the witness! Overruled. Lieutenant Grady will answer, the judge responded, waving the objection aside. Owen groaned and finally conceded the only option he could. The girls are soldiers, Owen replied slowly and carefully. They're naive, inexperienced, and in many ways ignorant. They require proper handling, time, and care to be used effectively. They're a lot like dogs. They respond well to people they trust. I have the good fortune of being someone they trust, and thus respond well to me. If the Navy expects them to work at maximum efficiency, then I'm necessary to lead the Raptor squad. Anyone else would be hard for the girls to trust. So your relationship is necessary for them to perform at their best? Yes. It has nothing to do with love or compassion. Those things can't be afforded in our line of work. I care about the girls because they are an essential unit that the Navy needs to use right now in these confusing extra-species circumstances we find ourselves in. Without the Raptor squad as a test case, we have no basis on the potential of an extra-species response team. This is the prototype, the beta example. And as such, these things must be handled delicately, and therefore I'm needed. But as I said, there is nothing between myself and the squad that would be considered more than professional and business. He'd said it. And as he glanced at Charlie and Blue, there was an obvious expression of disappointment, even crestfallen disbelief. He'd worked so long to show these girls that he cared about them, even loved them, that he wanted them to rely on him like they were a family. And now in front of the entire court, he'd announced it was all an act to keep them in line, a means of earning trust to make them efficient. His heart broke with the force of bones shattering. The prosecutor stared him up and down and then stepped back. "The people rest," he replied. Hammond rose to his feet quickly. "Your Honor, I move for a directed verdict." The room erupted into a hushed hum of disbelief, and Owen found himself staring around at everyone, surprised himself by Hammond's suggestion. "On what grounds?" the judge asked. "The people's case hinges on the argument that the girls are not cognizant of their actions and feelings, and as we've proven through this trial, they are more than cognizant. I think that's more than enough to consider the facts as they stand." The judge looked from him to the prosecutor and then inhaled slowly. As he exhaled a long and thoughtful sigh, he nodded. "Will the people in the defense rise?" The two tables followed his direction quickly and willingly, climbing to their feet. Blue and Charlie stumbled up fast, standing at attention. The judge waited a moment for dramatic emphasis and then carried on. "As soldiers, it is our duty to monitor our weapons, to clean them, care for them, and know how to use them properly. With this interspecies exchange program in place, and the advocation of extra-species soldiers, the question has been raised whether we consider them soldiers or another form of weapon to be used. I have always stood impartial, and I was interested to finally see for myself which side held water. After hearing the testimonies of Charlie and Blue, I am convinced of three things that I was not previously. The first is that the raptors in this room are some of the most frightening killing machines I've ever seen. To think that only 4 of you could engage a force of armed hostiles over 4 times your size is astonishing. And the Navy should reconsider its stance on how to best utilize you," he explained harshly. Charlie's face fell in disappointment, and Blue wrapped an arm around her. "The second is that despite your clear killing prowess, you are empathetic towards others, even humans. You clearly care about lives lost and lives saved, which is something no gun could ever do. Therefore, I can see that you are cognizant and thus fully in control of your actions and capable of thinking rationally, and that is beyond a doubt." He ran a hand through his hair and snorted with an almost laugh. "And thirdly, I hope that this little experiment is a success. If we could have more units like yours associated with our armed forces, I can't begin to imagine the benefit that might be to our country." He then raised his gavel. "I find the Raptor squad and Owen Grady not guilty on the grounds of self-defense in the line of duty as per any other commissioned Navy operative. We are dismissed. Get the hell out of my courtroom." Blue nearly collapsed from relief, and Charlie squealed, jumping up and down in complete unreserved fashion. Owen ran to both girls and threw his arms around them in a tight hug. For a moment, the awkwardness was past. He knew that what he'd said would be brought up later, and he knew there was no simple taking it back. He prayed with all his heart that Blue and Charlie would forgive him, but for now, they were still together and safe. Hammond nodded and shook Owen's hand, both giving continuous thank yous to one another. "Does this mean we can go home now?" Charlie asked. Yeah, we'll pick up Delta and Echo and head home right away," Owen answered. "Home. Sounds wonderful," Blue sighed. Owen glanced at her, and though she was smiling, there was a shadow of doubt in her eye. Charlie didn't notice anything and was running to Hammond to thank him, forcing her way through dozens of onlookers who were simply trying to snag a glimpse of the Raptor girl. Blue, about what I said. Alpha, you said what you needed to say," she said stiffly, straightening her back and forcing a smile. Forced, though. It was forced. "Blue, you girls mean more to me than—" "No, sir, you were right," Blue interjected. "We're soldiers, and we have to trust our commanding officers. There was nothing wrong in what you said. Don't feel ashamed of it." "I'm not ashamed of it, Blue," Owen muttered. I want you to know that that's not how I really feel." Blue finally relaxed a little, but the faint shadow of disappointment was still there. It would have to do for now, but one thing was for sure. The group was together again, even if a cloud hung over their heads for a long time. Owen did what he had to do, even if it hurt, but he couldn't help asking if it had been worth it. "That no-good bastard," Hoskins hissed from his lab desk. The doctor on the other side of the desk, a short Asian man with a cut close hair and slanted eyes, was sipping tea calmly, gazing at the lab notes in the corner of his white desk. There were glass walls on all sides, all showing the lab work going on outside. A yellow tint was made on the windows, giving the illusion that they were surrounded by walls of gold or amber. There was a soft hum of generators powering the equipment around them. "I can't believe it! I can't believe that son of a bitch!" "Relax, Hoskins," the Asian doctor replied. "Relax," Hoskins says. "What the hell do you mean, relax?" "I mean that things are still proceeding on schedule, and there's no immediate need for the Raptors yet. The longer we sit on this, the more likely there's an investigation. Do you know what the media's going to hit with us with if they find out the Raptors won't talk about this island? And even if they did, they don't know what's been going on here since they left. They have no recollection or knowledge of the operation. I highly recommend that we think on the matter at hand." Hoskins paused and glanced back at the good doctor. "Well, what's that supposed to mean, Henry?" "It means that she has reached maturity," Henry answered with a smile. "Would you like to see her?" Henry stood up from his desk with his teacup still in hand and walked past Hoskins out of the lab door, then a long and blank hallway. There were various doors and gates leading off in different directions on the compound. Each door and gate had signs and numbers on them, marking what was inside, where the path led to, and the quantity. But at the farthest end of the hall was a door marked with the letter I, and a number 2 was scratched out and replaced with the number 1. Henry pressed his hand on the pad and the door slid open. The path beyond the door led out into a walkway with a bulletproof plexiglass wall and roof around them, allowing Hoskins and Henry to look out but nothing to get in. They stood on the elevated pathway looking down at a paddock nearly 2 acres in radius with jungle fauna all around it. Below them, sleeping in a patch in the tall trees, was a figure that made Hoskins' blood curdle and his hair stand on end. Its hair was white, and its body was large, nearly 9 feet high, if it were standing. Spines ran along its back, and there were traces of red stains around its lips, which Hoskins didn't want to speculate on what left them. It was horrifying, and yet striking at the same time. "She's terrifying," Hoskins growled. "Precisely," Henry agreed. "And she's almost ready. I'll be calling our financiers at the Navy to discuss next steps. But for now, you can see why the Raptors are not our top priority anymore. If we can have her fitted, trained, and ready for deployment, no one will even care about the Raptor squad." "I ever tell you that you're one optimistic son of a bitch?" Hoskins muttered. "If that thing is as dangerous as you've claimed, I ain't sure what kind of man could train it." "Definitely not our Lieutenant Grady," Henry scowled. "It was a mistake to trust the Raptors to his care. He's too sentimental. At the end of the day, they're animals. All these extra-species people are more animalistic than society would like to admit. If you sympathize with them, it only detracts from the animalistic tendencies that separate them from us. What use is there in domesticating these things when it is their wild nature that so intrigues us to begin with? The world is boring enough as it is, in my opinion. Why take all the fun out of it?" "And you think this will make it more fun?" Hoskins asked. "No, but it will certainly make things more interesting," Henry answered. Hoskins turned, walking back to the door. "Are we done?" "Get me the hell out of here. I don't know what scares me more, that monster you made or you, Dr. Wu." As the two walked down the pathway, the creature in the paddock opened a single yellow eye, tracking their movements and smiling to herself. It now knew how they got in, and how it could get out. Chapter 13. The truck ride to the camp was long, bumpy, and it left Blue feeling weak. However, what really played on her heart was the entire courtroom scene. She had sat through each miserable portion of that trial, hoping that by the end they'd walk away together and happy. They were together now, true. Alpha in the front, driving the truck to camp, with Charlie asleep in the back, sucking her thumb childishly, and with Delta and Echo waiting for them. But she couldn't say that she was happy. That prosecutor, the things he'd said had her on edge. Every word had been poison. But what hurt worse was when he'd questioned Alpha and his answer. She wanted to believe it was a lie, an act. There was no way Owen actually didn't care about them. "You've been quiet, Blue. You okay?" Owen asked, glancing back. Blue nodded. "All's well." "I doubt it. Do you want to talk about it?" Blue didn't answer at first. She stared down at her feet silently until finally giving a long sigh. "Alpha, Owen, Sir, Owen is fine, Blue. The things you said, the stuff that happened at the trial, I told you. I had to say what was necessary to help you girls out, Owen assured her. I know, you said that, but I want to know, how do you really feel about us? Blue asked. Owen stiffened some of the question. Owen, you took us under your wing only about a year or two ago, and you've been good to us. I trust you with my life, sir. I always have, but if you don't see us as weapons, do you only see us as soldiers, or... Owen didn't answer at first. He just kept staring ahead, non-flinching, not speaking. Blue hung her head darkly inside. I'm sorry, that was inappropriate, and the Navy asked me to work with you girls because I used to train dogs when I was a cop with the LAPD. They thought those skills were sufficient for training you, Owen finally answered. To the Navy at the time, you were nothing but dogs, animals to be trained for war functions. Hoskins was the officer who was meant to oversee the whole project, my liaison with the island that bred you in the Navy. He commissioned your training. He's the reason you're with me now. We were just animals then? Blue hissed, her fist clenched. Well, that's what I was told. That I was being reassigned to work with an experimental case to see if liminal soldiers could be used in combat situations. They even gave me tools and gear for the express purpose of handling you. Reins, collars, chains, even tasers, Owen admitted. Of course, I never planned to use them. From the minute I met you girls, I knew you weren't animals. You weren't dogs, Owen snapped, interrupting Blue. That trial was bound to happen. It was inevitable. The incident on the island was just an excuse to kickstart it early, but regardless of when, it was bound to happen at some point. But why? Blue asked. That's what I don't understand. Why put us through that? Because the world doesn't understand you girls yet. Or any of the liminals, Owen replied. There are those who think you're real autonomous people with your own rights and sentience, like Hammond and myself. And then there's people like Hoskins who see all of you as just animals with a humanoid appearance. It's disgusting. It's like when we were... She started to think of the island. How those scientists and doctors had watched them. How they'd stood idly by when Echo challenged Blue for leadership. How they'd been more interested in the symptoms of Charlie's flu than actually treating it. How they had watched them eat, sleep, and even pee while just chatting away and talking like they couldn't be heard or understood. And of course there were others too. Other liminals on the island that she would occasionally hear scream or roar or cry out in the dark. But she would never be able to find them beyond her paddock. All of them, like her and her sisters, were treated like lab rats, testing lizards. She cringed and tried to bite back the tears of the memories. The island... I can't say there are many people in this world who will see you any differently than the way those lab folks saw you back there, Owen sighed. But you didn't see us that way? Back at the trial, I said what I had to. The truth is, Blue, that I care for all four of you girls, he said. I gave them the answer they needed so that it would keep you with me. If I truly thought you were nothing but animals or weapons, I would have reassigned myself in a heartbeat. You think I want to put up with Delta's attitude all the time? Blue giggled and nodded. You're right. I'm glad. For what? Owen asked as he turned the van up a dirt road towards the camp. We never knew our parents, you know. We never met them. I think the scientists took them away from us when we were hatchlings, so we don't remember much, she admitted. Owen didn't reply but stared away, his eyes focused. I know that. So when we met you, you were the first parent we ever had. I think Delta treats you the way she does because she's scared. Scared of having a figure like that. She hates it because she always wanted to know who our family was, and instead she gets you. I'm sorry about that, Owen said. There's no need to be sorry, Owen, Blue giggled, though Owen didn't perk up. There's plenty of reason to be sorry about that. But that's not important. Well, my point was that regardless of how Delta acts, we're all happy to have you as our alpha. We're glad you stood up for us, and I kind of understand why you did what you did back at the trial. The truck finally came to a stop, and Owen opened the door. It was night out, and the camp was quiet. The welcome cabin was in front of them, and a long dirt road led deeper into the camping area. Owen opened the doors for the girls. Blue poked Charlie, who lifted her head sleepily. Morning already? Time to go, Echo. And Delta, Blue urged. We'd been gone long enough, and Alpha's going to take us home. We'll sleep at the camp tonight and leave tomorrow. I'm sure you both need some rest first, Owen offered, walking them to the mess hall. First, let's get you both some food. The sound of food perked up Charlie, who instantly forgot her sleepiness and darted ahead towards the mess hall. However, as Blue started to follow, Owen paused as he felt his phone vibrate. Owen? Blue asked. It's nothing. Owen ignored it, not caring about the caller. As he followed her to the mess hall, he looked to see Delta at a table with Echo and 3 other staffers, a deck of cards on the table. Delta! Echo! Both girls spun up to see Owen, Blue, and Charlie. Echo gasped and stood up to come and hug Blue and Charlie. Delta didn't do the same, but she smiled. Took you enough time, she smiled. Everything work out? More or less. You playing poker? The staffers are trying to teach us, Echo explained. Delta's getting it. I'm not quite following it. Owen laughed but was interrupted by his phone again. He groaned, looked at the name of the caller, and then hung up again. Is everything okay? Charlie asked. It'll be okay, Owen laughed. Why don't you go ask for some dinner? Charlie needed no more directive than that. Delta watched her go and then frowned at Owen. So we're in the clear? We get to stay together? Sorry to disappoint you, Owen smirked. Blue grinned and Delta shrugged. Yeah, well, maybe next time, she said. Besides, maybe you're growing on me or something. She glanced back at Echo and they both shared an understanding nod. What on earth happened to you two while I was... Oh, for the love of... The phone was ringing again. He finally picked it up and snarled. Sorry, girls, I have to take this. Is it something important? Blue asked. Nothing to worry about. You girls eat and relax. I'll step outside and take it. Owen checked his phone and sneered at the caller ID. Stepping outside to leave the girls to their dinner and card game, he answered and put the phone to his ear. You got a good reason for calling me after the stunt you pulled, Hoskins? We need the Raptors now! A very uncharacteristically panicked and out-of-breath Hoskins cried into the phone. Owen's eyes narrowed. I don't know what scheme you've got cooked up, but my girls aren't... Will you shut up and listen, Grady? He practically yelled. This ain't a joke, This ain't a joke, man. This ain't a plan or nothing. This is real. The island's compromised. One of the assets is loose. She's... One of the assets, Owen hissed. Which one? I can't answer that. Hoskins, what the hell got out? Classified, Grady. Heavily classified. Goodbye, Owen threatened. It's one of the newer ones. She was brought on after you adopted the Raptors. She was more than we could handle. She somehow figured out how to escape. I don't know how, but she did it. She's been causing chaos all over the damned island. She's unlocked paddocks, letting other assets loose. She's stealing a boat and making her way to the mainland. If those assets get loose, if she starts a full-scale riot stateside, or if someone gets hurt because of them... It'll be the end of everything we worked for, Owen muttered. How deadly are we talking? What's the potential for carnage here? Grady, Hoskins whimpered. She's a bloody psychopath. I don't know what Wu did to her, but he's made her a murdering machine. Half the island security and staff were torn apart. I only just got off the island myself to call you. Is she provoked? Can she be talked down? You're not hearing me, Grady, Hoskins cried. She's not killing out of defense or for her freedom. She's killing for fun. It's a sport. We can't reason with it. We have to put her down immediately. This is precisely what your Raptor squad was formed for. You want to prove to me and the rest of the world they're worth keeping? Shoot them up and get them to my location. Owen stood stock still as he stared off into space, imagining what this meant. This was no ordinary liminal or demi-human criminal. This was a psychotic killing machine. Wu and his scientists likely did to her what he did to the girls. And if that's the case, she won't be merciful, and there's a chance the girls might even empathize with her. That would make killing her even harder. But Hoskins was right. The secrets of that island could jeopardize everything. Not just for the Interspecies Exchange Act, but for Owen and the girls. He didn't see any alternative. Where are the rogue assets expected to make landfall? Florida. Possibly near the Keys, Hoskins replied. I'm calling in favors for the National Guard. We're going to get there first and evacuate any potential target towns and beach resorts. Get your girls here now, Grady. The line went dead, leaving Owen with a cold and horrid pit in his stomach. And that is, unfortunately, all I have written. So, since we have a little bit of time, if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to know. Yeah, I only wrote 13 chapters, and there was a small side bonus story that I wrote, but we cannot read that one. I cannot read the bonus story. Maybe is the Indoraptor going to be used? Probably not. Is the Indominus larger? 9 feet tall. Yeah, I like the bit where Garth talked with Echo too. I enjoyed that bit. Needed a little bit of Echo to realize that she wasn't, she didn't need to hate herself. And Charlie had it rough too. Yeah, those questions really did hurt her. But anyway, I think that just about wraps everything up. If you guys do want to read the bonus story called The Everyday Life with Raptors Full Moon Special, it is available on the DeviantArt account under The Night Rider. You can read it there if you want. Is there any art that Hannah has made? On the thumbnail right now, you're looking at art of blue. I can show you the only art we have in the Indominus if you want. Give me just a second. I can show you the art of the Indominus really quickly. Alright, there we go. And open. So, this is the cover for the story. You can see Owen at the bottom. And you have each of the girls right here. The bottom left is Delta. Blue is above Delta. And then on the other side with the scar on her face is Echo. And Charlie is just above Echo. And the one in the top taking up half the screen is the Indominus. All right. But yes, that will do it for now. Before we go, last order of business, we need to decide what I will read next Monday, because we need to decide. So I will put it to a vote here in chat. I will give you a few options. Alright, let's see. Nomad, Taylor Monster Club, and Submerged. Those will be good. We'll start with those. Alright, I'm posting the poll now. I will give y'all 5 minutes to vote, and then we will call it a night.
I will tell you now, of the stories that are in the poll, Nomad, Nomad, Submerged, and Monster Club are all finished. Tale of Tomiki is mostly finished, but part 2 of Tale of Tomiki is not done. So if you want a story that is finished, 3 of those are finished. Nomad was dope as hell. Well, Nomad is winning. So maybe Nomad will be the one that takes it. We'll see. We'll see. Give it another 2 minutes and then we'll wrap it up. Anyway, let me go ahead and close this out. Yep, there's the full moon special. I'll go ahead and tell you now, just so that you understand why I can't read you the bonus chapter, for those of you who are new. In the scene where Owen is ordering the Raptors to stand down, if y'all remember, it's the famous scene where the guy falls into the pit and Owen has to go in and hold off the Raptors in that scene. I thought it would be funny to recreate that scene, but I needed a reason why the scene happened. So, in Everyday Life with Monster Girls, it's established in, I think, episode 3 or 4 or something, that when the full moon is out, the animalistic instincts of the monster girls come alive and makes them desire to mate. So, what happens in this story is Owen and Barry, his buddy, are coming back from a night out to chat. And when they come in, they notice that the house is dark and empty, so Owen tries to go to the paddock to check on the girls, only to see that they are being influenced by the full moon and very much in heat, and they start to move in on him, wanting to, mate with him. And I recreate the scene, literally word for word, of what he says to them, like the moments where he goes, "Delta, I see you, back up," that kind of thing. But we also hear what the girls are saying, which is, very much erotic. They wanna mate with him, and it's meant to be very funny. So that was the reason. And the reason I can't read it is because the last time I tried to read it, people took it the wrong way. People thought, wow, this is fetish stuff. It really wasn't. It was meant to be funny. Anyway, let's see what won. Yep, Nomad won, 50% overall. Not bad. Hey, Raven, is a Monster Club game a continuation of the story? Kinda, yeah. It takes place after the events of the main story, but it's kind of a side story. So, yeah, it takes place after that. All right, well, tomorrow I'm hoping that the new PlayStation will be in and we will christen it with a stream. That is the goal. I want to christen the new PlayStation with a stream. We could do For Honor or Dead by Daylight or something. If it is not in tomorrow, we will do the Monster Club game. And I'm planning on Halloween. We will either stream Dead by Daylight or we will do the Monster Club game. Either one, if we don't do the Monster Club game tomorrow. So that is the plan. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I know that this was short, and I'm sorry to disappoint you all. I wish that the story were further in. I need to sit down and finish writing it. I really do. I know that Aaron has been demanding that I finish it for a while. So tell you what, I might work on that.
Hey, Raven, did you see that the Vatican is having an anime girl mascot? I did not see that. That's kind of silly. But anyway, thank you guys so much. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.